We turn now to our scripture reading for this morning, and we are still in Luke's Gospel. This morning we read from Luke chapter 15, the first few verses, and then we skip down to verse 11. And so Luke chapter 15. One day, when many tax collectors and other sinners or outcasts came to listen to Jesus, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law started grumbling. "This man welcomes outcasts, sinners, and even eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. He then tells the parable of the lost sheep, where there are 100 sheep, one goes missing, the shepherd leaves the 99, goes to look for the one, and brings that one back, and then there's a celebration. He then tells another parable about the lost coin, where a woman loses one of 10 coins and stops at nothing until she finds that coin and then celebrates. And then Jesus went on to say, "There was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to him, 'Father, give me my share of the property now.' So the man divided his property between his 2 sons. After a few days, the younger son sold his part of the property and left home with the money. He went to a country far away, where he wasted his money in reckless living. He spent everything he had. Then a severe famine spread over that country, and he was left without a thing. So he went to work for one of the citizens of that country, who sent him out to his farm to take care of the pigs. He wished he could fill himself with the bean pods the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything to eat. At last he came to his senses and said, 'All my father's hired workers have more than they can eat, and here I am about to starve. I will get up and go to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against you, and I have sinned against God and against you. I am no longer fit to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired workers.' So he got up and started back to his father. He was still a long way from home when his father saw him. His heart was filled with pity, and he ran, threw his arms around his son, and kissed him. 'Father,' the son said, 'I have sinned against God and against you. I am no longer fit to be called your son.' But the father called his servants. 'Hurry,' he said, 'bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and shoes on his feet. Then go and get the prize calf and kill it, and let us celebrate with a feast. For this son of mine was dead, but now he is alive. He was lost, but now he has been found.' And so the feasting began. In the meantime, the elder son was out in the field on his way back. When he came close to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him, 'What's going on?' 'Your brother has come back home,' the servant answered, 'and your father has killed the prize calf because he got him back safe and sound.' The elder brother was so angry that he would not go into the house. So his father came out and begged him to come in. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've worked for you like a slave, and I have never disobeyed your orders. What have you given me? Not even a goat for me to have a feast with my friends. But this son of yours wasted all your property on prostitutes, and when he comes back home, you kill the prize calf for him.' 'My son,' the father answered, 'you are always here with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be happy, because your brother was dead and now he is alive. He was lost, but now he has been found.'" Thanks be to God for these words to us. The parable of the prodigal son is probably one of the most well-known, that and the parable of the Good Samaritan, to so many people. And essentially, the parable of the prodigal son is about God's outrageous, reckless, extravagant love for all people. God's outrageous, reckless, extravagant love for all people. Symbolized by the father who runs out and greets his wayward son. But it's deeper than that too. It's about how we treat others, and it's about the choices that we make. A common theme in all three parables is lostness. The lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. He once was lost, but now he's found. And it's also, in all three parables, there's a celebration when that which is lost is found. The scribes and the Pharisees see Jesus spending time with people that they consider sinners, outcasts. And they criticize Jesus for even eating with these people, feasting with these people. And so Jesus tells the parables. In each parable, there's celebration and feasting when that which is lost is found. But the Pharisees and the scribes only grumble, just like the older son. He refuses to join the celebration. He allows anger and resentment to stop him from enjoying the feast. Think about that. He allows anger and resentment to stop him from enjoying the feast. He is so focused on the sin of his brother that he excludes himself from the banquet that is being thrown. One of the commentators wrote this: the way the parable plays out, it's the righteous who are excluded. Indeed, who exclude themselves from God's presence, since God welcomes the lost who are found, and throws a celebration feast, to which the older brother chooses not to go to. When we hear the parable of the lost son, we have to ask the question, who is really lost in the story? Who is really lost in the story? Henry Nouwen, in a beautiful book based on this parable, and more importantly based on, which you can't see so well on the screen because of the lighting, but a painting by Rembrandt that if you can see, and in fact all that you can see on the screen is probably the most important. That screen's not working, but that one you can see a little bit more clearly, but it's a beautiful painting. And what you can see is the son, the older son excluding himself, and the father embracing the younger son. And Henry Nouwen's little book is a reflection on the parable and on this painting in particular, because Henry Nouwen writes about how when he saw this painting, he just stopped and sat and looked at it until it spoke to him. And he writes in that book, he says, the lostness of the elder son is much harder to identify. After all, he did all the right things. He was obedient, dutiful, law-abiding, and hard-working. People respected him, admired him, praised him, and likely considered him a model son. Outwardly, the elder son was faultless. But when confronted by his father's joy at the return of his younger brother, a dark power erupts in him and boils to the surface. Suddenly there becomes glaringly visible a resentful, proud, unkind, selfish person, one that had remained deeply hidden, even though it had been growing stronger and more powerful over the years. He goes on to say, there are many elder sons and elder daughters who are lost while still at home. And it's this lostness, characterized by judgment and condemnation, anger and resentment, bitterness and jealousy, that is so pernicious. and so damaging to the human heart. But we could argue that the older son had every right to be angry, didn't he? He's been working hard while his brother is off jawling. He didn't waste his father's inheritance like his brother. He is the good one, and his brother is the bad one. But let's look a little closer. When the younger brother comes to his father and asks for his share of the property that he will one day inherit, we're told that the father divided his property between his two sons. He gives both sons their inheritance in that moment. The older brother received his share of the inheritance. He wasn't cheated out of anything. The practice at that time was that the father's estate was divided amongst the male children, because it was a very male-dominated system. The oldest son would always inherit a double portion of the inheritance. It goes way back to the law of Moses that says the firstborn son will receive a double portion. So the older son receives a double portion of the inheritance, 2/3 of the father's estate. The younger son receives 1/3. So the older brother actually receives twice as much as what the younger brother does. When the older son refuses to join in the celebration, we're told that the father goes out to him and begs him to come in. But he refuses. The father says to him some incredible words. "You are always here with me. Everything I have is yours. You are always here with me. Everything I have is yours." He goes on to say, "Now your brother has returned. The family is whole again. Let's celebrate." But in his angry rant, the older brother says, and in verse 29 we read, "Look, all these years I've worked for you like a slave, and I have never disobeyed orders. What have you given me? Not even a goat to have a feast with my friends." Does that sound like someone who the father says, you're always with me. Everything I have is yours. No, I've been working like a slave. I've never disobeyed your orders. Is that a father-son relationship? This is a loving father who runs out to his wayward son and welcomes him back, who goes out to his other son who chooses not to come in, begs him to come in. Does that sound like a slave driver or a master who simply orders his son? No, there's a relationship. And finally, the younger brother is back into that relationship again. That's why there's a celebration. But the older brother is so caught up in his resentment that he can't even see that. He was given his share of the inheritance. The livestock were his. He says, "You didn't even give me a goat to kill." That's a lie, a blatant lie, because his father gave him 2/3 of everything he owned. So the older brother has had everything that he needed. But he has chosen, instead of living as one loved by this loving father, as one who sees himself as a slave, wanting to earn his father's love. The older son chose all this time not to use the opportunity given to him. He just wanted more. He squandered the opportunity given to him as much as his brother did. just in different ways. Now, you might say I'm being a little bit too hard on him, but he missed what was right in front of him because he was so locked in to his anger and his resentment. But there's also the element that he believed that he could earn his father's love. He worked in order to get something out. He wanted a return on his investment. The only reason he stayed with his father was because he wanted something. At least that's what's implied in the parable. Again, it may sound harsh, but we need to see this through the lens that Jesus is saying to the scribes and the Pharisees who are moaning about him spending time with sinners and outcasts. But before we're too hard on the older brother, we need to recognize that the younger son thought that he could earn his father's love back too. Well, I mean, I'm not denying that he didn't squander all his inheritance, but his brother, his older brother, accuses him of spending the money on prostitutes. Nowhere in the story do we read about that. The brother's hatred is so much that he even extends and expands the sin of his younger brother. But his younger brother is also locked into this frame of thinking that says, I have to do something in order to earn my father's love. When he realizes what he's done wrong, he says in verses 17 to 19, he says, all my father's hired workers have more than they can eat, and here I am about to starve. I will get up and go to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against God and against you. I am no longer fit to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired workers. Treat me as one of your hired workers. In other words, there's a sense in which he thinks, if I go back and work hard enough, maybe I can be accepted back into the embrace of my father's love. But that's not the way the Father works. You are always with me. All I have is yours. That's the attitude of the Father. And so when the younger brother chooses to outcast himself from that, to exile himself from that, when he comes back, that's all the Father wants. I simply want to always be with you and give you all that I have. That is the desire of the Father. No strings attached. Unconditional. We cannot earn it. We cannot earn God's love. God is love. And that love is always available to us. We either choose to receive the love or to reject it. And in this story, both sons chose, in a sense, to reject that love, to exclude themselves. But the younger son comes to his senses and comes back. The elder son, at the end of the story, is left outside, not participating in the family or the banquet feast. The love of God is freely available to all. We cannot earn it. We don't deserve it. We can only be embraced by it and embrace it. The Father doesn't demand anything from the Son. He just loves unconditionally. One of the commentators wrote this. He says, what we don't find in the parable is very significant. There's no appeasement theology. And goes on to explain what that means. He says, the father doesn't first run to the servants' quarters to beat a whipping boy and satisfy his wrath before he can forgive his wayward son. No. In the story of the prodigal son, the father bears the loss and forgives his son from the treasury of inexhaustible love. He just forgives. There's no payment. There's no appeasement. Justice as punishment is what the resentful brother called justice. Justice as reconciliation is what the loving father called justice. The only wrath we find in the parable belongs to the Pharisee-like older brother, not the God-like father. But that's not all, as they say in all those adverts on the television. It's not just about God's love for us. It's about our love for one another. Barbara Brown Taylor writes the following. She says, both sons suffer from the illusion that they can be in a relationship with their father without being related to each other. What is the father to do? The father prepares a meal for both of them and lets them figure out what to do with each other. I love that thought. How does the father reconcile the two brothers? He throws a feast and leaves them to work it out. The feast is ready. We've got to work out how to relate to one another. Doesn't stop the feast from happening. She goes on to say, it's about giving up the idea that we can love God and despise each other. We simply cannot, no matter how wrong any of us has been. The only way to work out our relationship with God is to work out our relationship with each other. The only way to work out our relationship with God is to work out our relationship with each other. John van der Laar, in his notes for this week, says, the parable ends with the father's proclamation of love to both his sons. The younger is left with a choice of whether he will believe that love is irrepressible enough to overcome his foolishness, self-centeredness, and wastefulness. I just want to pause there and say, nobody's excusing the sin of the younger son. It's about recognizing that we all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And yet, God offers us love and forgiveness. It's about embracing that and recognizing that my brother is a part of that too. My sister is a part of that too. My neighbor is a part of that too. My enemy is a part of that too. The older is left with the choice of whether he will believe that love is irrepressible enough to set him free to enjoy his life and the abundance to which he has access. And both brothers have to face the choice of whether irrepressible love will show them the way to restore their broken relationship. Jesus never tells us how the brothers choose. There's no ending to this parable. Did you notice that? It's an open-ended parable. We are left to decide for ourselves what choice we will make as we reflect on the choices of the two sons. What choice will we make? Will we receive love or reject that love which is freely given and always available to us? Do we choose to enter the banquet or to stand outside with our resentment, our hostility, our anger, our need for more than what the other one received? There's a sense, and last week we focused on grace, and compassion, grace, love are all linked. But there's a sense in which we recognize that grace is freely available. We can't earn it, but it's there for us all. God's relentless love is always there for the choosing. And God invites us to love others as Christ loved us. You are always with me, and all I have is yours. That's the promise, not just for those who are good enough, not just for those entitled enough because they think they've done all the right things. That promise is for everyone, no matter how degenerate they may be. You are always with me. All I have is yours. All we need to do is embrace that and embrace our brother and our sister around us. Let's pray. In a world that cannot understand the mystery of love, that is afraid to divide it, to dive into it in any meaningful way, may we be examples of this mysterious love and help others to know your love. In a world that is becoming more fragile from so many broken relationships, may we be examples of your unconditional love and start to heal those places of brokenness. We can so easily get scared to live fully, wondering when we will have pushed the limits too far. Thank you that there are no limits to your love, God, and that we can confidently live life to the full. We can so easily get overwhelmed by all the forces that play in the world, feeling like they're pushing against each other. Thank you that the power of love is far greater than any other, and that it is indeed irrepressible. Amen.